Chapter 1. Recon Phase. Years later. Team Pilgrim on subject Mar Nosso. Hold on, Joseph. I have something coming in. Breaking news. We have just received word that an anonymous source has come forward with details of the vicious attack that occurred just last night. Going only by the moniker Watchmaker, the source claims to be close to the terrorists involved in the horrific scenes at the premiere of Escape from Solo Nobre, and they warn this studio that more attacks will be coming in the following days. Meanwhile, concerned spokeswoman Maddie Powers gave a press conference an hour ago, assuring the outraged public that security measures would be sufficiently raised to meet the ongoing threat, and that the terrorists and their handlers would be brought to justice. Milton Masada was unavailable for comment. MNNN, Mar Nosso News Network, The Triple, approximately 6 hours after the event. D-Day +2, early hours, several days before the event. Gustavo Gus Masto scratched at the balaclava where it irritated the skin around his mouth as his battle buddy Louis Valka ghosted past him, weapon in the aim, to cover the opposite side of the door. Gus hated the way his breath condensed into a cold patch around his mouth under the synthetic material, and had to will himself to put his gloved support hand back around the wooden handguard of his weapon. What a ridiculous weapon it was, this old thing of iron and wood. It looked like it was old before he was even born, scratched and chipped into a parody of a rifle, sawn off both at the stock and barrel, to create a giant bolt-action pistol with a box magazine. An Obrez, the dealer in Sadie called it, and all they could get at such short notice. "Don't worry," the wretch had wheezed in his thick accent, combat indicator of his status as a member of the lesser colony. "I include some special rounds. Big boom," he added with a wink. Gus hadn't been amused by Grau's retelling of the incident, doing the accent and everything. Being savvy enough to clean and test-fire the fucking thing before deployment, Gus had to agree with the man. The hand-load Wildcat cartridges projected a flame out of the barrel 3 feet long, and provided enough recoil to remind you what a bad idea they were, to the point where Gus tried to convince Valka to swap with him. "Get fucked," the big man had replied, cradling his shorty pump shotgun, affectionately named Rhino Stopper, in augmented arms of contoured black alloy. And that was that. Valka held that same shotgun as he covered the doorway opposite Gus, dressed identically in black balaclava, dark work shirt, and trousers with a sturdy pair of boots. Both men had simple canvas grab bags thrown over their weak side shoulder for spare rounds and other accoutrements. It was a shit setup, but needs must. Skulking in the shadow cast by the outer wall of the target compound, some 8 or so feet tall, the 2 recon men were almost invisible once they settled still into positions, muscle memory of countless drills and operations, honed to a razor's edge, despite the bizarre circumstances they found themselves in. Volker made eye contact with Gus, both hands remaining on the pistol grips of his weapon, keeping it trained on the doorframe. Gus fished inside the baggy pocket of his work shirt with his offhand and pulled out the improvised flashbang. It looked exactly like what it was, a small metal tube with holes drilled into it. Inside the outer tube was a smaller plastic cylinder connected to a wick, which in turn was attached to some disposable cigarette lighter flint taped into the top with a striker. The cylinder contained the magnesium and reactant crap they managed to buy locally from a shady wholesaler. It was shit, again, but needs must, and they had to roll with it, fast and loose. The line had rapidly become something of a mantra. Upon holding up the device in a deliberate motion, Valka nodded and showed a thumbs up, prompting Gus to brace the striker against the compound wall. Valka counted down in silence, dipping his shotgun muzzle in time to his internal count. 3, 2, 1. Breach. Gus ran the striker along the rough wall, catching a spark first time, as Valka simultaneously rotated at the hips and delivered an augmented mule kick to the door of the compound. His boosted strength ripped the sturdy wooden construct right out of its frame and sent it flying into the unknown beyond, as Gus underarmed the flashbang into the opening. Valka was back in position an instant later, and both men dipped their eyes low as the chemical magic happened. Blinding light burst from the ruined doorway, accompanied by an almighty boom, and the Recon men were moving. Valka first, followed by Gus, crisscrossing smoothly to cover opposite arcs upon entry. Upon clearing the doorway, Gus was confronted by the sight of a bulky man desperately batting at his burning pants leg with a bit of carpet retrieved from God knows where, tears streaming from blinded eyes. The improvised flashbang had chucked some of its inefficiently burned fuel all over the interior of the compound entrance, evidenced by tiny fires spread about the gravelly ground and truck parked there, and some had seemingly hit this unfortunate mook's security uniform. Without ever knowing what hit him, the night guard went down like a sack of shit hit by a sledgehammer. A fist-sized hole blasted through his chest as the Obrez roared its battle cry. Gus winced as the thing kicked back into his arms, though he rolled with the recoil, smoothly dropping the rear of the stockless weapon to his waist to allow easier racking of the awkward bolt action. Gun back up, he scanned the rest of his immediate surroundings whilst sweeping his arc, moving to a corner to his immediate right. His followed the line of this wall all the way down, some 25 yards to the next right angle of the perimeter wall, harsh light of the sodium street lamps outside, contrasting with the pitch shadows cast by the concrete. Gus let his eyes adjust for a second as he paused, his ears still ringing from the combined blasts of the flash bomb and his outrageously impractical gun. The security guard gurgled a couple of wet breaths before going still. No other targets presented themselves. Volker completed his own sweep and smoothly wheeled on the front door of the target building, a rough but sturdy-looking steel number, no doubt dead-bolted from the inside. Gus followed Valka's line of advance and stacked up behind his comrade, careful to cross the door as far out as the compound would allow. It was clearly of quite robust construction, so nobody expected rounds to come blasting through, but it never hurt to be cautious. Anna and Marco silently filed into the compound behind the assault pair, the former sporting nothing but a knife. Marco had managed to acquire a sawn-off shotgun, which the old veteran held at the hip, twin muzzles tracking everywhere his eyes went like a sentry turret. Gus caught Anna's eyeline. Shit, it still feels weird referring to these guys by their first names, and gestured to the long edge of the target building with his offhand. Anna nodded, leading her partner around the corner out of sight to clear the rest of the compound exterior. Valka reached out and tested the door handle, keeping Rhino's stopper pointed at the entrance as he tensed, putting a considerable amount of force through the black alloy limb. The lock mechanism groaned in protest, but held. Valka assessed the situation in a split second. It would take too long pounding on the door to gain entry. Anyone could just start shooting at them from a window, and they didn't have any elements in place to suppress that kind of pain. Surprise was their only advantage. He stepped back a couple of paces, edging along the bare brick wall, back to back with Gus, as his buddy read the movement and followed suit, covering their rear. Valka paused and took a knee, tapping Gus on the calf to indicate a halt, and his counterpart knelt close, backs touching, still covering their arcs. "Too heavy to breach," he said quietly. They'd already gone loud with gunfire, it was true, but it never paid to advertise your position in such a vulnerable situation as the one they found themselves in now. Gus grunted in acknowledgement, eyeing the barred ground floor windows with venom. The upper floor windows were not barred, and a heavy metal guttering system was bolted just below the roofline, complete with vertical runoff pipe that passed conveniently close to the appealing entryway. Thank God for cheapskates, thought Gus, and he told Valka as much. Deciding not to wait to see if the other two had found a better entrance, Gus handed his rifle pistol to Valka and began to scale the metal drain pipe like a monkey, hand over hand, feet braced against the wall. Once he reached the upper floor, Gus peered over the sill of the window, sweat running down both sides of his nose, itching like crazy under the balaclava. He blinked sweat out of his eyes and puffed a controlled breath out with the exertion of holding himself clamped to the side of a building, and saw nothing but darkness. "Weapon!" he barked to Vocc and looked down, extending his shooting arm out to catch. Vocc threw his shotgun up with perfect accuracy, which Gus nearly fumbled, catching it awkwardly by the barrel because he was expecting to catch the obres, but he understood why, after he finished nearly shitting himself. He tossed the stumpy gun carefully and caught it by the pistol grip, testing the heft as he held the muzzle steady towards the window. If he got compromised, he'd only have one shot dangling from a gutter, and a shotgun would cover a much larger area than the comparatively accurate obres. "Flashbang," he called out, and Vocc already had it in his hand waiting. The big man took a step back, scraped the striker off his other metal palm, once, twice, before it caught, then launched it through the upper window with inhuman power. It shattered the plate glass on its way in and smashed itself apart in the process, bursting with a pathetic "pfft" instead of a booming flash, gobbets of burning liquid setting the room beyond the window on fire. "Fuck!" Gus grunted as he smashed the loose glass away with a shotgun muzzle, then scrambled one-handed through the window. He pushed through the rapidly rising flames, breath held, and yanked the door to the upper corridor open as Vocc stormed up the drainpipe faster than an eager rat. The big man piled through the window and set about stamping out the mini-fires that threatened to engulf the place. As Gus chose a random direction and leant his upper body into the corridor, weapon punched out into the aim. Pistol fire banged loudly down the corridor, spanking from the wall and ceiling in front of him, causing him to flinch as they cracked past. "Shit, wrong way." He ducked back and pivoted on his heel, punching out in the other direction towards the centre of the building. The corridor terminated onto a square landing that topped a set of stairs, upon which a lone gunman was laying down, exposing as little of his body as possible, pistol braced on the top step. 2 more rounds tore by, close enough that Gus could feel the air displaced by them, as Rhino's stopper boomed, muzzle blast casting the corridor in a fitful light that seared itself into Gus's eyes. The shell hit low, throwing chunks of threadbare carpet and wood splinters into the shooter's face. He screamed and reflexively jerked back, causing him to tumble down the stairs in a clatter of limbs. "Vocc, on me!" Gus yelled as he stepped into the corridor, racking the stubby shotgun, smoking shell case clacking off the tight corridor wall. The big man gave a curt "Yep" in confirmation and ceased stamping out the flames. Vocc extended the obres like a pistol and gave the other end of the corridor a cursory sweep before getting on Gus's shoulder and following the few yards to the top of the stairs. The gunman was the boss of the private security detail they'd been watching for the previous 2 days, and now he lay on the centre stairwell, clutching his face and panting as he fought to control the pain. Gus pumped around into his chest, blasting him bodily across the landing into the wall, leaving a bloody streak on the carpet behind him where he stopped in silence. "Ch-ch-ch! Give me that!" Vocc grabbed the shotgun from Gus and roughly shoved the obres back into his hand, fishing a couple of shells from his grab bag to slot them home. "There's one more," Gus said, his grin detectable under the balaclava by his tone. "I'll let you have him if you want." Vocc backhanded him across the dome, and Gus felt like he'd been hit by a small car. "Focus," he admonished the younger man. "Threat's not over." "Roger that, you bald cunt," Gus bit back. "Finished burning down the house yet?" "Yeah, flames are under control." Chunks of brick and old paint blasted over their heads as automatic fire tore through the wall directly above them. The third security man announced his presence, shooting wildly through the room adjacent to the top of the stairwell. The burst of fire ripped a line inches overhead of the 2 recce men and would have killed them had they not been bickering halfway down the stairs like a pair of idiots. "Cover!" Vocc yelled as he braved the inaccurate hail of rounds and scrambled back up the stairs on hands and knees. Gus fired up and at an angle, trying to guess the position of the shooter through the wall as best he could, racking and firing the bizarre weapon as fast as possible to provide at least some meagre suppressive fire. Vocc was at the door to the room in a couple of seconds and ordered, "Switch fire," so Gus didn't shoot him. He cocked his leg and put a prosthetic foot through the door, ripping it clean off its frame, and Vocc stormed in, blasting the bewildered man off his feet and smearing half of him across the nearest wall. "Clear!" he yelled, before he reappeared with an automatic rifle of boxy construction, all stamped steel and plastic furniture, complete with a bandolier of magazines. Gus changed magazine on his obres and looked up at the big man with jealousy in his eyes. "Mine!" Vocc yelled with just as much enthusiasm, stuffing the shotgun into his grab bag and slinging the bandolier over the same shoulder. "Focus!" Gus whined in an approximation of Valka's voice. The security was down. That just left the target. "I know where I'd be if I were him," Gus thought to himself, as the pair silently stalked to the entrance of the compound, opening the deadbolt to the front door of the building to let the rest of the team in.